It seems that personal data is the flavor of the year for threat actors, and they don't really care about Aunt Bertha's bunions. I love it.
Yeah.
So it was great.
I'm sure Aunt Bertha's happy about that.
Aunt Bertha's bunions.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax, HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to episode 459 of the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me is Donna Grindle from Codden.
You got it stuck in the back of your throat there, eh?
Codden. Oh man, so lots going on. Like, this is one of those weeks since our last recording that, you know, stuff's just flying by a million miles a second, and you're like, dude, what are we going to catch? What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, it's kind of like, let that one go.
I know.
I got my hands full right now.
I know. It sometimes happens. It's not hard to put together content to talk about. It's hard to narrow down what content to talk about.
Yes.
So luckily we had the Verizon DBIR come out, the data breach report that comes out every year. And this is probably one of my favorite reports, mainly because of they're sarcastic and I like it.
Yeah, they do. I love the way they write this thing. It's really cool.
Yep. So we'll be going over that in just a little bit. And there, as always, some interesting things to point out. So
yeah, we'll see just how interesting they are too.
But before we get to that, I want to say thanks to all the listeners who help us stay on the air and contribute to all of our vices by being a donor. We thank you very much. If you want to know more about...
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And if you want to know more about either of us, don't ask ChatGPT. No, go to helpmewithhipaa.com and you can find out more about our day jobs and what we do to actually put food on the table, or brown water, as Donna would say.
Yes.
Either way.
Priorities.
That's right. All right, let's dive into our HIPAA Say What? No, our HIPAA brief, because we're going to talk about gap analysis versus SRA and risk management plan reviews, because why not?
Yeah. So first of all, gap analysis is what often we get handed when there's like, let us see, show me your SRA. Boom. And you look at it and it's a gap analysis. And it's not an SRA. If it you know, a lot of folks, it's like, well, it's supposed to show you the risk, impact and likelihood is the risk and all of that calculation. And it could have those lines, the columns on it. Generally, it's just a spreadsheet, but really all it has is it has the, if you will, the items that are in the law. And it's just saying, are you doing these things? Which is not an SRA, which is funny. Yeah. That they say, yes, we're doing an SRA and this is one, but it's not one.
Yeah. Or, if you get it and as you're reading it, it says you should perform an SRA. It's probably not an SRA.
Yeah. It's a gap analysis. Hello.
Yeah.
And so many people, especially if, you haven't really taken the time to realize that this is not, you don't do the same things you used to do. It's not the same. And everybody acts like nothing's changed. And, at the boot camp, one of the office managers at a group that we work with said that her big realization, like in the middle of boot camp, was, I've treated this just like it's any other compliance thing, and it's not. A bloodborne pathogen stays a bloodborne pathogen. The bloodborne pathogens don't change a lot. What you need to do about them and what you need to know about them, that may alter a little bit, But your compliance for that just means you need to make sure everybody understands it's doing the right thing and protecting and wearing the PPE or whatever they need based on whatever kind of environment you have. This is not like that. And it was like, no, I've been trying to tell you it's not the same.
Yeah.
So
your bloodborne pathogens are not asking you for a ransomware payment.
Yeah. Or changing its tactics on a regular basis.
That's right. That's right.
And you don't suddenly get like a new computer does not bring in new bloodborne pathogens.
One would hope.
You hope not, anyway. But it was really an interesting, to see that switch. And this is somebody who's seen me speak a litany of times. I mean, I can't even count the number of times she's seen me speak. But at the boot camp, when she finally came to the boot camp, it's when that shift happened of, boo, I see the light.
Yeah.
So
just because you got time to tie it all together.
Yeah. Well, and you really start to look at and make that comparison. You're sitting down, you're not flying by. So at any rate, that's often what people have is this gap analysis that's just looking at the security rule and seeing, are you doing the things in the security rule? And then kind of rating them as high risk, low risk. Mm-hmm. And even then, not very well. So, so that's not an SRA. The SRA should have things on it like phishing, social engineering, a tornado, a fire, malicious insider, disgruntled employee. All of those kinds of things should be in that list. And then you're looking at, would it be catastrophic if this happened? Would it be, nah, or it's so unlikely we're not even going to worry about it. If it does happen, we'll deal with it. Mm-hmm. That's what you should see on your SRA. Now, most people will do that and then they'll go through and they'll say, well, we've mitigated that risk down to low. That's not the way I do it because it's not helpful and it's not telling you where you really are. So we rate the risk and say, this is the actual risk you face. Now, let's look at the things. Let's assess your program and see what you're doing that will mitigate those risks. And by the way, one of those risks is failure to comply. Mm-hmm. So we look at then, what are you doing in your program and how mature is that to actually tell whether you're really mitigating a high risk down to medium, right? Or low. So then you have the residual risk after you've applied all of your mitigation. So I can look at both things. I don't lose sight of just how much, again, I don't lose sight that, phishing is a serious problem. And just because I'm doing these things doesn't make it go away.
No, because even a low risk can still happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, it's not gone, but that's the way out. Oh, well, it's low risk. Everything's low risk. We're good to go. No.
Yeah. It's like, would you jump out of the airplane with the low risk that your parachute won't open? Yeah. You want no risk. Like I want zero risk.
Yeah. And we're not going to get that. We're just never going to get to no risk.
Yeah. What was the saying? If first you don't succeed, don't go skydiving.
I have a friend that has a hysterical story about skydiving, but it involves where the chute. Anyway, if you do not properly put the straps on, things can happen when that chute goes. Anyway,
yeah.
I'll tell you that story sometime. But so back to where we were. After you have your SRA, then you develop your risk management plan that says, what do we need to do better at mitigating the risk and make sure we maintain those risk mitigations. So we need to, this seems to be working, but let's audit it and make sure that it really is working, not it just seems to be. Can we prove it? Do we know that? Have we reviewed this entire new thing that we've, put in last year? Let's see that it still looks good. So all of those things along with, hey, we got a high risk. We're not mitigating even down to medium, so we need to really up our game on that one. So that's what your risk management plan should have. And your risk management plan and your SRA should be a living document. And part of that assessing, where you are and how your program is can be the gap analysis. So just know those are all different pieces that you have. Your risk management plan has to be based on the actual SRA, which is evaluating the threats and vulnerabilities and what you need to worry about. Your risk management plan then identifies how you're going to reduce those risks, and that's your residual risk. And a gap analysis shows you how you're doing on making sure that you're meeting your compliance obligations. All different things, but the same process.
Yeah. And to make things worse, when you have the same verbiage being used,
oh my God,
but a different meaning. So that happens often if you go to some IT provider or MSP and you say, I need a security risk analysis. Often what you will get is you will get like a cyber risk analysis. They're only looking at your technology. Very, very fine scope of what they're doing.
Yep.
So you have to ask the questions because you're saying SRA, they're saying SRA, but you're not talking about the same thing.
No, because they do not evaluate. And they may say, we're going to evaluate the fire, but what they're going to evaluate is the impact of the fire to the computers, not to your ability to operate your business and care for patients or provide services to your clients.
Right.
So, yes, very important that your vocabulary is proper.
Yeah, because unfortunately there are vendors out there that are telling these folks, IT folks, you just go out there and you run this tool and you charge them some money and there you go, you're good. There's their SRA. Like, no.
You go through this questionnaire and that's it. That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Anything that starts with all you got to do is wrong.
Yeah, there's your red flag.
Yeah. Like we always teach it. If this is easy, if an SRA feels easy, you're doing it wrong. That's the first indication that you're doing it. It should not be easy.
Yeah.
You're supposed to evaluate all the threats and vulnerabilities. And the first step of that, perfect segue into our 405D tip of the week, is the first step of that is a complete inventory. And we've touched on the fact that they've announced, OCR's announced that they are starting a SRA enforcement initiative because they've got people that are doing them wrong, not doing them at all, or getting the same answer every time because they never do anything to change it. They're just doing the paperwork. And we talked about that happening, so we're up in our game in everything that we're doing and evaluating our entire process just to make sure that I want ours to always be beyond reproach. I mean, you can always say, well, you didn't catch this one thing, but you caught everything else, and look at this inventory. But if you have no inventory and you didn't catch that one thing, okay. Yeah. So having that inventory of all of your devices, the software you use, but also most importantly, all of your data. And if you don't have a data classification process where you make sure small, medium, and large, doesn't matter. Everybody needs to know what data do you collect, how valuable is it, and what do you do with that data? Where does it live, move, and breathe? That's called data classification. And our new poster, it's a one-pager, but it'll be invaluable in making sure that you're taking all of that into account when you're doing your inventory of data and figuring out all the things that you should protect so that then you can look at what could go wrong and then how are you doing protecting it and what can you do better. That's what the whole process is about.
Yep. There you go. So how to implement data classification.
Yeah, and we have a link to it, but you can also get it 405d.hhs.gov, of course.
Go there often.
Yeah. We're working hard, constantly working on putting new stuff and giving you resources. And there's a reason that we're doing that, because you need it.
Yeah.
Go forth and prosper.
All right, let's jump into our Verizon Data Breach Investigations report, because this is where we learn, based on hopefully other people's data breach.
Yeah.
What's going on? What are the trends? What should we worry about? And we overlap these types of things onto what we're doing to make sure we're, focused in the right direction and solving the right problems.
And having the right things on our SRA.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, for example, the top 3 things that are, don't talk about people making an error, misuse, all of that: credential theft, phishing, and exploitation of vulnerabilities. All 3 of those should be on your SRA.
Mm-hmm.
So, just note to self, everything we talk about in here should be addressed in your SRA. But the reason that we watch this and pay attention to this is the tactics change, the information changes, and therefore we need to be prepared to respond.
Yeah.
So, the vulnerability thing, and I know patching is something near and dear to your heart, is a big piece. But the credential theft and phishing, when you look at the graphs that they show that go back 2020, 2022, 2024, and we see credential theft and phishing just spiking in 2021. And then they kind of go down in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're seeing is the increase in that exploit of vulnerabilities has merged with phishing. As phishing's gone down, it's going up.
Mm-hmm.
And, the good news is some of these are going down. The bad news is there's others filling the gap. So don't get too excited.
Yeah. Yeah. And they can change on a dime, because the whole credentials thing, though going down, also played an absolute role in the Change Healthcare hack.
Yeah. We got, anyway, let's don't go down that rabbit hole right now. But the big difference in the vulnerabilities and how the exploiting of a vulnerability has increased 180 times year over year, 180% year over year. And most of that, at first I'm like, well, it just has to do with the big Move It breach, Progress Software, the big Move It breach, and that was huge. It was a massive breach. They identified 1,567 that involved breach notifications, just the ones that you know about, not all of them, from that individual vulnerability.
Wow.
So it'll be interesting to see if it drops. But then I went back and looked at previous years. Log4j was right before, it's like, it seems like there's going to be a big blockbuster one, but that is absolutely a key piece, the vulnerabilities. But the other two to me go hand in hand. The theft of credentials and phishing, because my question is, how'd they get those credentials? Now, there's a lot of theories, a lot of ways they could get it. They could get it by hacking a vendor and all that kind of stuff. But a bunch of them they get by phishing, is my feeling.
Yeah. Well, we hope that somebody didn't crack open all the stolen LastPass data.
Yeah, we would know it. You and I would be one of the first ones to know if that happened. So,
yeah.
But anyway, the other thing that we know is ransomware still the big daddy. Owns the block. The chief mobster is ransomware. But here's another little sad piece, is that so there's ransomware, and that's when they actually go in and encrypt the data and lock you out of your computers. That's what happened with Change Healthcare. That things are not usable. And when that happens, everybody knows. Everybody knows.
It's like when somebody calls, how do I know if I have a ransomware attack? Oh, you'll know.
Yeah, it's not one that you just sort of think. And they often say, we noticed some unusual traffic, and then boom, 2 days later.
Mm-hmm.
No, if you notice unusual traffic, pull the plug and figure out where that's coming from.
Yeah. That brings to light the whole see something, say something. Never is it more important than that.
Yeah. We notified you there was unusual traffic and you did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Or the one I loved one time years ago, a couple of days ago, I saw my mouse moving around and I didn't, thought it was kind of unusual. You think so?
Is it dinner theater? Let's just show you how this is done. No, really? All right. But back to the good news is ransomware dipped just a little bit. The bad news is because they're not actually encrypting. They're just going in and stealing the data now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those are the ones that scare me because that had a significant increase.
Yeah. And sometimes you may not know when that's happened. Because if I just go in and steal your stuff and leave,
Mm-hmm.
you might not notice.
Well, yeah, and usually you don't. But what does happen is that they quietly extort and it doesn't make the news. They aren't notifying, and some aren't even obligated to notify, which people are shocked by. And then some that are obligated to notify, we know for certain that they don't always do what they're supposed to do. So
Are you sure?
I'm going to go with yes. It is for me to advise. It is your business decision, and sometimes I cringe when I say it.
Yeah. I do wonder with all this Change Healthcare stuff, because I know I've seen it now. I know you are too. The government is trying to find every way they can to jump on that and force something to happen.
Well, they don't have a choice.
No, they don't.
Everywhere you look is pressure.
Yeah. It's just, where is it going to land? Because it's like anything else. When you're making decisions under pressure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we already kind of know. The good news is when it comes to the cybersecurity stuff, we were already building it. We pretty much know where that goes. And we know that there's virtually no budget or staff for enforcement. So if they fund enforcement, we continue down the path that we were on that includes some funding specifically for securing our health systems, all of it, the entire sector. Then if we do those things, which we were already going down the path, that was already happening, it was already in the plan. If those things happen, the good news is it's going according to plan. The bad news is nobody wanted to do the plan until boom.
Yeah. I think one thing that concerns me is, and maybe it'll never happen, but I'm always afraid they'll come up and say, if you know anything about a data breach involving healthcare, then you're compelled to turn them in, file the report, whatever. And if you don't do that, then you could be held, accountable. Because then I'm like, dude, what? I mean,
They'll never do that. They'll never do that.
I hope not.
No, it's impossible. It's impossible to hold, millions of people responsible for telling what they know. I mean, if that were the case, you could say anybody that knows anything about a, first degree murder, you're required to tell it. And if not, you're just as liable. I mean, that's not going to happen either. So, if you cover it up and you're an officer of the company, now we're talking a little bit different because you were obligated to meet those requirements for the organization, and you are choosing to cover it up within the organization. Now we got a whole different discussion because now it's bordering on criminal activity. But civil, these civil lawsuits, most of them never go anywhere. Occasionally they do, but those are the one-offs that matter. And those usually do involve some sort of liability because it involves 1, 2, 3 patients, where somebody was doing something they wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's way out there. You know, we got a long way to go before even holding people accountable for not reporting. I mean, there's no penalty for not reporting, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we go from no penalty to that. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Hope not.
No, well, unless we switch to a whole different type of government where, you know, hey, I don't like you today, you're going to jail. We could do that. That changes everything. We'll have a different conversation. But we're not there anytime with this, and the plan that we have, and the 5-year plan, and the plan that was put in place by HHS already. They're all reasonable things. And encouraging enforcement is not a bad thing, because we know the enforcement of these things, you're talking 20, 30 cases a year. And
not a lot.
Yeah. I mean, they have like virtually no staff. I don't remember. We had that conversation at the boot camp where it was like when we had Allison there answering questions about how OCR works and the investigations and that kind of stuff. And so, and the point was, well, you know, what about, you know, when are they going to do something about some of these people that we know are doing this wrong or not even trying? And it was like, yeah. And we go through, well, how many people do you have in this region? Well, how many do you have in this? They don't have any staff, and they get thousands, like 30,000 things to investigate a year that doesn't even count data breaches. You know, some crazy number of calls. So if we want, if that enforcement isn't even there, I mean, you're talking like conspiracy theory stuff to get it to that far. Anyway,
well, let's talk about some stuff we do know.
We do know ransomware and extortion. Extortion. And those are the ones that we worry about because, you know, it's people that have signed an NDA and somebody that's not you is making those. But that's where I think that we're going to see, what I do think we're going to see is whistleblower legislation. Whole different ballgame there.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it the FTC side that pays whistleblowers? Is that right?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ones, but the one we just saw was fraud and abuse. But generally it involves some level of fraud. There's certain different ones that include a whistleblower where whatever it is they find them, you get 50%, 25%, something like that. So, but you've got to do a lot of things to be that whistleblower. I think a lot of people don't understand how stressful and complicated that is. It's not like you go, hey, so-and-so did this, stroke me a check. No.
Yeah. Fill out this online form, we'll send you a check.
Yeah, that ain't how it works. But I do think there's a possibility we'll start to see that, particularly in software vendors. You know, big services vendors like Change Healthcare, that kind of stuff. But those are going to be the, you know, bigger scenarios, not the smaller.
Right.
But the big issue here, ransomware, when they add the two together, it went up. So, like, a lot. Statistical nerd, it grew by 9%. 9% more extortion only. And when you're looking at, you know, a few thousand, that is a bigger number. So there's the big piece, but the other big thing that came out is it's the people. And
never heard that.
Yeah, I know. I was like, how long have I been saying that? I know we went all the way back. Episode 20.
Wow.
And in September 2015, which, by the way, this month is 9 years, David.
Oh, is it? Happy anniversary, darling.
Aw, are you getting me something special?
I'm going to get you the same thing I got you last year, but bigger.
I'm glad we live in different cities. Smell you later.
The good thing about it is over these past 9 years, our income from this podcast has quadrupled.
Yeah, it has.
We're still doing it for free.
Our donations, they're making a nice dent in, Anyway, yeah, you're right. We what is it? I love when we get to say to people, if you're unhappy with it, our free podcast, we'll give you triple your money back. And they're like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, I did that for the first time at a conference. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody walked up and I was like, we're the only podcast that give you triple your money back if you don't like it. And they were like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
And it's like, oh, no.
Yeah.
All right, so it's the people. And they brought it out. And so what they're doing, though, is it's good to see that they're trying to narrow this down so that we can see better metrics on security awareness programs and where they might be working and where we need to do things. So they have now made a change in the calculations to make it easier to track malicious privilege misuse versus, just errors and stuff, which is security awareness can help with both, but you would hope it helps more with errors than malicious. Well, it helps with both. Never mind. But they made a point. We've revised our calculation of the involvement of the human element. I like how they call it that. To exclude malicious privilege misuse in an effort to provide a clearer metric of what security awareness can affect. For this year's data set, the human element was a component of 68% of the breaches, roughly the same as the previous period. So that really hasn't changed. Even
so we just got to get rid of the humans.
Right? Yeah, the human. And so then I'm like, well, then it's like, did they take that human element out of privilege misuse or did they include privilege misuse? I don't know. I was like, either it really didn't change no matter what they did.
Mm-hmm.
But they also looked at supply chain causing a 15% of breaches and vendors with a major vulnerability, it's still a human element in there somewhere.
Yeah. Right.
But I do like it when people act like this is a whole new discovery. It really always involves a human. Really? I never thought about that.
No, we want to blame it on the zeros and ones.
They got in a fight. Anyway. Another one is the breach involving human error. 28% of breaches involve human errors. A significant, that's, for all those people who I'm too busy to follow a checklist, I'm in a hurry to get this done, I don't have to worry about it. You need to realize every time you say that I can do this off the top of my head. I don't need to fill out a form or follow a checklist online Basically what you're saying is that a 28% chance that you will be the reason we have a data breach. When it happens, you're willing to accept that risk.
Yeah, because you just got to get it wrong once.
Mm-hmm.
Do something you didn't intend to do or something changed. How often do you and I talk about an update that unchecks a box or checks a box or whatever?
And or adds a new box.
Yeah. It's like, wait a minute, that I know for a fact that was protected.
Yeah.
That was enabled, whatever. And you go back and it's not. You're like, what happened?
Yeah. I'm just going to do it for a minute and then I'll put it back.
Yep.
Never a good thing. But so 68% of the breaches involved a human element. 32% involved ransomware or extortion. 28% involved human errors. And 15% involved a third-party software, including software vulnerabilities. It included a third party, not just vulnerabilities. I was included in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they did point it out really nicely. That, they have such wonderful little comments. The folks that write this every year, I look forward to reading that. And I encourage everybody, we'll have a link to it in the show notes, but Go read it. And they use they're working on using a vocabulary that makes it clear what everything is. So an end user is an average employee or contractor of the organization. It more than doubled from 11% to 26% as far as being involved in the breaches and those errors. And most of the time, it's misdelivery.
Typed it in wrong or something?
Yeah, you just send it to the wrong person. You pick the wrong patient. Whatever it is misdelivery is part of the same growth in the miscellaneous errors pattern. So basically, that's it. And I love how they say, all in all, it's been an upsetting year for all detail-oriented professionists out there. Yeah, it has. So, and once they get your credentials and they steal them, boom, they're hitting those web apps because that's how they're getting in. And, you know, the phishing and the vulnerabilities, again, I see they go together. I don't know. But it's a separate thing, but desktop sharing software. Let's take a moment. I should go back and show, look for how many times we've said, do not expose RDP. Only access RDP through the VPN and with MFA. I mean, we've been saying that as long as we've been saying it's the people.
Yep, we have.
Well, guess what? That's still right on up there. Some sort of desktop sharing software. So,
because I mean, if you're going to secure anything like it's the end of the world, it should be your remote desktop software. And I'm saying remote desktop, not necessarily meaning RDP, but anything that does that. If it does any type of remote access, and some people don't even realize that Zoom can do that. And how many people uses Zoom? But Zoom has a feature to do remote support.
Yeah.
Which means it can connect to your machine. So, how many people have Zoom on their machine but haven't bothered to look at how it's secured? Or do you have MFA turned on for Zoom?
Yeah, now everybody's like, stop, pause it. Let's go look. But knowing that that's all happening, and they were in their discussion talking about, everybody was talking about VPNs being hacked, that there are vulnerabilities in VPNs. But there is a distinct, huge statistical difference between the number of times that VPN vulnerability was used in a data breach and the number of times a desktop sharing application was used. It's like,
oh, I'm sure
on the little graph, there's like a tiny, you see that there's actually a blue line, like maybe, and then there's a big chunk on the bar chart.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, their point was, oh, it's definitely, okay. But you're better off with the VPN. You're definitely better off with the VPN. All right. So the other thing they've broken out is the supply chain stuff. A whole new category where they're going to start tracking. They pulled in data, I think going back to 2021. And it shows just on that one little chart where they put it in there, a 4% to 16% jump in it being supply chain. And we don't see that getting any better.
Oh, no.
So they call it the supply chain interconnection metric. And it's like the business partner was part of the breach, or they were included in a physical site where the partner hijacks. It's a whole very rare thing, but physical breaches in the partner facility or hijack to gain entry to the organization's facility. So that's really, you're talking nation state stuff when you get to that. But they were expecting to get some heat because they said, we're going to include vulnerabilities in our supply chain metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is. And they're like, they thought that was going to be controversial. I think the big controversy was, and you highlighted, I just say highlight. Go ahead and read that stuff right there. Read that one right there. Because that one I was like, oh.
Yeah. So for a breach to be part of the supply chain interconnection metric, it'll have to have taken place because there is a business partner with a vector of entry for the breach, like the now fabled heating, ventilating, and AC, the HVAC company, entry point of 2013 for the target breach. Or if the data compromise happened by a third-party data processor or custodian site, fairly common in the MOVEit cases.
And Change Healthcare.
Yep. Less frequently found in our data set, but also included are physical breaches in a partner company facility or even partner vehicles hijacked to gain entry to an organization's facility.
Yeah, so they're saying that, and they say, well, that they think including the... No, go ahead to the next paragraph I highlighted there.
This metric ultimately represents a failure of community resilience and recognition of how organizations depend on each other. Every time a choice is made on a partner or software provider by your organization and it fails you, this metric goes up. We recommend the organization start looking at ways of making better choices so as to not reward the weakest link in the chain. In a time where disclosure of breaches is becoming mandatory, we might finally have the tools and information to help measure the security effectiveness of our own prospective partners.
I think that will get more attention when people read it than just including vols.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I think we've talked about this before too.
Yeah.
Vetting your vendors.
Yeah. And yeah. I mean, that start looking at ways to make better choices. Now, and a failure of community resilience and recognition how we depend on each other. How many times you hear, well, it's not my problem.
Yeah.
Somewhere it is. Somewhere it is. And the piece of how many times do you hear, well, so-and-so works with their mom and they own the company, and in small business especially. Well, we know they're not secure, but we don't want to, stop using them because of blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yep, because you're dealing with people.
Well, yeah, it's the people.
Yeah, I mean, because think about it. You're not making a logical decision. You're making an emotional decision when you do that.
Good point. Yeah, it's very different, and so you've got to start, looking at it, I guess, and saying, "Hello, let me deal with this objectively instead of subjectively." You're right. They also then, as they're talking about vulnerabilities, they are saying, okay, we've never really tracked vulnerabilities, but we're going to start doing that. And it wasn't good when when we get to the other part about it wasn't good, but then you just think it's not good until you read the next part. That patching is not happening fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we've talked about before, how complicated that decision is, how complicated it is. But I'm thinking, a couple of weeks, we got to work this out. And that's 55 days to get a critical patch out to 50%. And I'm like, 50% of the vulnerabilities, it takes 55 days for the volume of people that are installing the patch. So that's a long time. 180 days is 20%. We're unremediated. So the fact that is taking so long when we know it's a critical vulnerability. So they're talking about a 0 day that we know is high risk. It's in the known exploited vulnerability list that CISA puts out. And they did the numbers, and they're like, okay, it takes us 85% of the vulnerabilities were unremediated at 30 days. 50% unremediated at 55 days. So this is not good. And then they go and look at the numbers of how long does it take the bad guys, particularly the ransomware and extortion people who are living the good life. It takes them 5 days to start using it.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you took that chart and flipped it upside down, that's probably what it would look like.
And they had another great quote. This love story between 0 day vulnerabilities and ransomware threat actors puts us all in a concerning place. That's fun. But then I can't, you just read the, even though this survival analysis chart looks bleak, it's the optimist view. You go ahead with that.
Yeah. So even though this survival analysis chart looks bleak, this is the optimist view of the situation. We must remind ourselves that these are companies with resources to at least hire a vulnerability management vendor that tells us that they care about the risk and are taking measures to address it. The overall reality is much worse, and as more ransomware threat actors adopt 0 day and or recent vulnerabilities, they will definitely fill the blank space in their notification websites with your organization's name.
Ow!
So yeah, although it's bleak, it's much worse than bleak. I mean, if I had a doctor tell me your health is pretty bad, and that's the good news. It's like, geez.
I know. It's kind of like, your heart is struggling to beat, but that's the good news.
No, it's like, geez.
Yeah. Your brain is actually being eaten, internally by something. So it's like.
Well, that would explain a lot.
Yeah. So, I mean, that right there was just really harsh reality. And I think a big piece of why they're saying supply chain. And there is a whole discussion of, okay, what can we do to patch better? But more importantly, what do we do to prevent these from needing to be done in the first place? And
I don't know.
Let's fix it.
So just speaking for ourselves here, we patch as fast as possible, but we have a whitelisting process that a third party handles. So a lot of things have to wait unless we manually push them out. But we also have a problem oftentimes where, especially with laptops, where people won't turn them on so that the patching can happen. Or, they'll say, please don't patch during business hours because they interrupt stuff. And then they turn it off at 5 o'clock. They don't turn it back on till the next day.
Or over the weekend, it's not on.
Yeah, right. And we spend a considerable amount of time calling people to say, would you please leave this machine on so we can patch it?
Yeah. And then it's like, well, can't you just wake it up? Okay, now we have a whole new list of security issues we have to talk about. And it was like, some of it has to do with, the change in the way that to develop software faster, we kind of got rid of a quality control cycle. It just was gone. Mm-hmm. We'll patch it on the back end was the solution, and that's kind of gotten us where we are. We've got to add back in, quality control took too much time. Design and documentation took too much time. So we take that out so that we can be more agile and we're able to throw this software out there. Great. We've been able to make great innovations because of that. But just like any other pendulum, it swings way wide.
Yeah. Well, that's because a lot of these software vendors want to come out with a new version every year. The only thing the new version is the repair from the stuff they should have done the last time.
If all your new versions are bug fixes, yeah, it's a time to pay attention.
Yeah, they'll throw in some kind of feature if you want to call it that.
Yeah,
but it's so funny because some of the software I use, it's got a basic function. Like I don't need a new feature. I just need it to do the same thing it's always done.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't disagree. So, but there's a couple of other things. There's good news on the AI front. That's awesome.
It's going to be around a while.
Yeah. Well, they're like, let's talk about it. We're not adding anything about generative AI as something we monitor yet. And they went and did a data analysis, which is great because we needed some good news. They went through and did several different ways of looking at the data to see. Now, the good news is it's not imminent. The bad news is if you ignore it, it'll be too late. It's really what we have to look at here. So they said, you can get ahead of the curve. And that's really what we always preach is don't wait. If you wait, it's only going to be worse. And you may suffer from it. So their quote was, the threat actors might well be experimenting and trying to come up with generative AI solutions to their problems. Frankly, they're making a whole bunch of money without it right now.
No, that's the scary part.
Yeah. There is evidence being published of leveraging such technologies in, quote, learning to code activities by known state-sponsored threat actors. Now, we know they're investing in everything. And for those who think that, healthcare is a key area that nation states attack for several reasons.
Oh, absolutely.
And they steal the data and move on.
Yeah, and it's not even from the nation state side, not even necessarily about the value of the data. It's about disruption. Yeah,
and the information, they're not looking to make money off of it. They're looking to use that for some disruptive, cyber war approach. You're right.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't look like a breakthrough is imminent or that any attack side optimizations this might bring would even register on the incident response side of things yet. Okay.
Wow.
So it's they're looking at actual data that's fairly recent. Now, if you think about it, as we've talked about, the leaps and bounds that it's grown are just in 2022, and we know what we're using it for. Now, they're looking at data of where is it being used? How are they looking at using it? What are we tracking on the dark web? That was the good news. The only exception here, and that's when I was like, oh, man, it has to do with clear advancements on deepfake-like technology, which has already created a good deal of reported fraud and misinformation anecdotes.
Oh, yeah. And it's the deep fake thing. I was just watching a video earlier. I mean, some of this stuff is just so much better than it was 6 months to a year ago.
Oh,
it's
crazy.
Unbelievable how fast and how good it is.
And it's only getting better.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like the thing with AI is we don't know what we'll do with it until we're doing things with it.
Mm-hmm. And like most things, it'll be like, I didn't know we could use it for that. Or that's not what the intention was. I mean, there's all kind of stuff.
That's like, there's always the household hacks like start a fire with potato chips. It's
yeah.
I mean,
it's going to be like anything else. It's going to amplify whatever it is. If somebody's going to do bad, it's going to amplify that. If somebody's doing good, it can amplify that. So it's going to be the same thing.
Yeah. And amplify is the big concern. So anyway, so there's that. AI, and then of course we have healthcare. We got good news and not so good news. Just that. Just keep that in mind. That there's some stuff. One thing of everything is personal when you're a person. I say that all the time in my training classes. They found some important things about personal data. So here are the top few notes that they specifically about healthcare. Now, we used to talk about that years ago. I want to say 2017. They said that healthcare was unique in that it had a bigger problem with internal threat actors than external threat actors. And it was the only industry that had that. And we're like, yeah, I don't see that staying that way. And then it started creeping back up. Well, that's over.
Oh, boy.
Insiders deliberately causing breaches have surged back into second place after a steady decline since 2018.
I mean, self-inflicted wounds, that's the worst.
Yeah. Well, privilege misuse is a lot of it. The good news, though, is personal data is now what they're targeting more than medical data.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, but you think about how the medical data is stored. It's a lot harder to pull the medical data and do something with. But healthcare has a ton of personal data.
Right. Well, the other thing, too, is that word target. Because, oftentimes it's not that you were targeted. You just got swept up in a, campaign.
Right. And so they'll get the medical if they got time for that. But the first order of business, system intrusion breaches is still in the top 3. So they're still coming in. And then we have an error, miscellaneous error is the biggest problem in healthcare.
Wow.
Miscellaneous error. So back to, I'm too busy to do what you tell me I need to be doing. I am too busy to do that. Those are the miscellaneous errors for the vast majority of them. But we also have one other error called a gaffe that other industries done, where people just blurt stuff out. But no. So, the big issue is miscellaneous errors, and then privilege misuse, and then system intrusion. And that misdelivery thing is still the biggest problem. We just bring it back to that. Taking the time to make sure you're sending this to the right email, to the right office, not to the newspaper when you're trying to send it to the pharmacy, which we've seen that happen.
Yeah, because people do like I do. I type the first 2 or 3 letters, and whatever fills in, that's usually who it is. Yeah. But if you don't pay attention, there's no telling you can send it to.
And if you are sending something that is important, then you should always look and be sure I've got this attachment, I've got this link, whatever it is, that you're sending that data out. And first of all, I also am not a fan of just attaching it in email and saying we got encrypted email because, well.
Yeah.
So if you're working with PII, security specific things like configurations or loading software, those kind of actions, stop. Do the red panda. Take a minute. And I mean, literally just add another 15 seconds. But it's going to take too much
time.
Donna,
I know, 15 seconds times 10 times a day. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the thing about it is go through a breach. See how much time that takes up.
Yeah. Or you be the person that caused it. You be the person that caused the Change Healthcare breach. Because statistical likelihood is it was a flat out error because they were in a hurry and not paying attention. Based on these numbers. And we already know a person did something. So, the best news about the medical data isn't the most important. And of course, they had, the downside is that we've got tons of personal data. We got more than most people in healthcare, and it never gets purged. So they just keep it forever. But they also had a comment about it. It seems that personal data is the flavor of the year for threat actors, and they don't really care about Aunt Bertha's bunions. I love it.
Yeah.
So it was great.
I'm sure Aunt Bertha's happy about that.
Aunt Bertha's bunions. All right. So then you can close it out with the way they closed the report out, which was really cool.
Yeah. So they concluded the regularly scheduled programming. We hope that you have found the information in this document helpful, actionable, and enjoyable. So, yeah.
The DBIR
That's our
team
show for today.
That wishes you a safe and prosperous year. I mean, it's just, these guys are great.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. But certainly go and check out the report. There's a lot more data in there. A lot. Yeah. So go check it out. You can surely pull some information out of there to share with your own team, build some training around it, discuss the issues that was found in the report and how it might interact or interfere with your organization. And then, hopefully it gives you some guidelines about what you should be paying attention to for the next few months anyway, until things change. But
who knows what's next? Yeah.
That's true. That is true. All right, folks, that is our show for today. Thanks again for listening. Be sure to share this out to your favorite people and even those you hate because, why not? Help us spread the word and go leave us a review. We hadn't had one of those in a while. Don't make us have to ask AI to give us a review. So anyway, for Donna and myself, remember that HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
Help me with HIPAA. Let's get it right. Protect your patients. Day and night. Donna and David, the experts on your side. Help me with HIPAA. Let's get it right.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.